In color, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. And in Washington, Eric Severide, Roger Mudd, Dan Rather, Marvin Kalb, Bert Quint in Saigon, Robert Shackney in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Charles Kuralt on the road tonight in Frenchboro, Maine.
Good evening. President Nixon's appeal for support on Vietnam may have found a sympathetic audience among the silent majority of Americans to whom he directed his plea. But the doves on Capitol Hill were not so receptive. Roger Mudd sampled the reaction today.
The response of the president's Democratic war critics today was to deny on the one hand that they had helped raise hopes about the speech, and then to express disappointment on the other that the speech had fallen short of their hopes. Senator Fulbright of Arkansas said the president's justification for the war was based on historical error.
If you accept his assumptions and President Johnson's, there's no justification for winding down the war. You ought to go on and win it if it really is justified. If it is not justified, as they say it is, by an international conspiracy of nations seeking to take over the world, if it is not, that's not so, then it ought to be liquidated. And so I think it's a very important speech because he now truthfully has and fully taken as his own the Johnson War, and I think it's based on a fundamental error.
Senate Majority Leader Mansfield said he found nothing new in the speech.
Senator, what would you have had the president say so that you would have found something new in it?
Nothing specifically. The initiative in that respect should be up to the president, but I was hoping against hope that something would come out which would give the American people hope. I thought that there would be some ray of hope given to the American people which would indicate to all of us that this war could be shortened considerably.
Senator Stennis of Mississippi, who said he was satisfied with the speech, was asked if the U.S. could withdraw honorably from Vietnam within 2 years.
I think it's possible within 2 years. I say possible. But I'm not much on putting timetables on items of that kind. It just depends on many things beyond our control. Oh, I wish we could come on out now, of course. But I'll make up my mind and say so if I ever decide that we better get out regardless.
Senator.
But until then, I'm not going to be putting any timetable on anything. That's a giveaway, I think.
It was from a former Secretary of State, Dean Acheson, interviewed by Marvin Kalb, that the strongest Democratic praise came.
Were you in any sense disappointed that he did not come through with something very spectacular or dramatic?
Not at all. I would have thought it was a sham if he had. I wouldn't have believed it. Because there is no spectacular solution. This is a tough problem. And I think he's attacked it in a tough way, and I think he's dealing with it in a sober, responsible manner.
Tomorrow morning, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee meets to reschedule the Vietnam hearings that had been postponed because of the speech. Chairman Fulbright says their purpose will be to educate the same silent majority Mr. Nixon claims supports him. Roger Mudd, CBS News, Washington.
The public flooded the White House today with messages about the Vietnam speech. Most of the response was favorable, but not all was spontaneous. Dan Rather reports.
The president spent much of today convincing himself and trying to convince others that his Vietnam policy speech is an overwhelming success.
At mid-morning and then again in the afternoon, the president called reporters into his office to show them a desk stacked high with telegrams. The president indicated that most of the telegrams favored his Vietnam speech, although he acknowledged that some, he didn't know exactly how many, advocated immediate U.S. withdrawal from the war. What pleased Mr. Nixon most was that so many of the telegrams were signed members of the silent majority, a phrase he had used in his address last night. Late in the afternoon, it was reported from Denver that one of the telegrams the president received contained 20,000 names from the state of Colorado. Admiring the telegrams, the president quipped, "I wish I had stock in Western Union." At the Western Union office, a few blocks from the White House, 22 private line teletypes and 8 commercial channels were operating continuously to handle the all-day flow. Before the president's speech, Republican Party officials around the country were directed to generate as much favorable reaction as possible. The Republican National Committee's weekly newsletter, for example. A publication called Monday urged writing and wiring the president. The newsletter goes to about 13,000 Republicans, including all county organizers.
How many of the telegrams and letters are spontaneous, and how many part of the carefully orchestrated Republican Party publicity campaign, it is too early to say. Dan Rather, CBS News, the White House.
100 congressmen today sponsored a bipartisan House resolution backing President Nixon's efforts to find peace. They said the nation needs an affirmative showing of support for the president. Groups planning next week's Vietnam moratorium demonstrations called the president's speech an insult to the intelligence of Americans. In their words, the speech gives us all the more reason to double and redouble our efforts.
When you're moving 300 head of cattle through strange territory, it can happen before you know it. Come to where the flavor is. Come to Marlboro country.
Chances are John, Terry, and Mark are headed for tooth decay. Many of their favorite foods will be the cause. One won't. Diet. The safe gum. Safe because it's sugar-free. Doesn't cause cavities. Diet. In 4 kid-pleasing flavors. Diet. The safe gum.
In Saigon, President Thieu expressed full agreement with Mr. Nixon's address of last night, saying South Vietnam wanted nothing more than to gradually take over responsibility for its own defense. For a report on general reaction there, here is CBS News correspondent Bert Quint.
For many South Vietnamese, Mr. Nixon's speech was reassuring. President Thieu always has been confident that Mr. Nixon would not abandon either his government or his country to the communists, but many of his military colleagues, many government officials, and many private citizens were certain that they already had been betrayed by Washington. Some had feared a complete, immediate withdrawal by the Americans or a unilateral ceasefire. One Vietnamese journalist, who before the speech accused Mr. Nixon of abandoning his country, remarked later, "It was a tough speech. I feel better now." While it makes the South Vietnamese feel better, Mr. Nixon's pledge to continue fighting as long as need be does nothing to change the combat situation of American and South Vietnamese troops. And it does nothing to reassure some American embassy officials and military officers who have their private doubts about how things are going. Diplomatically, the feeling is that it's the communists who are calling the turns. They feel certain that American public opinion will force the eventual withdrawal of American troops, despite Mr. Nixon's words, come what may. Militarily, again despite Mr. Nixon's optimistic appraisal, there's little evidence that South Vietnamese troops can do the job the Americans have been doing. True, they are taking up positions that had been manned by the Americans, but they have yet to be tested. There's been a lull in the war, not of the Allies making, but of the communists. Once the pressure is resumed, if it is, then the test will come. Mr. Nixon tried to prevent a renewal of this pressure by saying the withdrawal process would be stopped if the level of fighting increased. In the end, though, it will be the enemy who makes that decision. Bert Quint, CBS News, Saigon.
In Europe, Britain and West Germany, among other governments, praised Mr. Nixon's speech, but many newspapers expressed disappointment that it contained no dramatic new proposals. And it was denounced by the communist delegates to the Paris peace talks, who charged that it outlined strategy designed to prolong the war. Whether reactive to the president's speech or not, 2 of the principals in the administration's Vietnam policy are reported today on the way out. One of them is the top U.S. military officer in Vietnam. CBS News correspondent Stephen Rowan reports.
2 or 3 days after the rumor first began circulating around the Pentagon, reports persist tonight that General Creighton Abrams soon will leave Vietnam to be replaced by General Ferdinand J. Chesarik, who now runs the Army's Materiel Command here in Washington. It must be stressed that top Army officials at the Pentagon have unofficially denied the story, but an official denial under consideration all day has yet to be issued. Nor has the White House denied that consideration is being given to the reassignment of Abrams. White House News Secretary Ron Ziegler says no such recommendation has yet been made to the president. The commander of U.S. forces in Vietnam is known to be unhappy with the orders he received in July, telling him to change his battlefield tactics from the effort to search out and destroy the enemy to a posture of what is now called protective reaction. In August, he argued against further sizable troop withdrawals, and President Nixon delayed that move for a few weeks, then announced the second reduction. Sources elsewhere in the administration insist that Chesarik is the man who has been selected and say that he's already notified some of the officers who work with him that they will be going to Vietnam. Since Chesarik's major interest has been in the movement of supplies, his selection to replace Abrams could be interpreted as a new message to Hanoi that the United States intends to withdraw all its combat forces from Vietnam, leaving only the men to support the South Vietnamese Army. Stephen Rowan, CBS News, Washington.
Henry Cabot Lodge, the chief U.S. negotiator at the Vietnam peace talks, is expected to resign within the next 8 weeks, partly because of discouragement over the continuing deadlock at Paris. That report comes from CBS News diplomatic correspondent Marvin Kalb. He quotes administration sources as saying that Lodge, aside from weariness over the Vietnam dilemma, wants to return home to Massachusetts for personal reasons. And Kalb has learned that unless there is a break in the talks, the 67-year-old Lodge probably will not be replaced immediately. Rather, the U.S. side of the negotiations would be conducted at a lower diplomatic level to demonstrate Washington's displeasure with the lack of progress. In the war, the Central Highlands capital of Ban Mi Tut was placed on special alert following an outbreak of heavy fighting in nearby jungles. North Vietnamese had attacked 4 Allied base camps in the area near the Cambodian border, killing 3 Americans and wounding 61. But the communists were reported to have lost more than 150 men. Overnight, the enemy also shelled 45 towns and bases, causing light casualties. In the Middle East, 2 Soviet-made rockets struck an Israeli settlement near the Lebanese border today, causing some damage. Just where they were fired from was not disclosed, but tonight Israeli Foreign Minister Abba Eban warned Lebanon that it faces retaliation if it permits Arab guerrillas to attack Israel from Lebanon soil.
Television now brings you 30 seconds of radio from Panasonic. Radios that find their stations electronically, that tune automatically. Little clock radios and bigger ones. Great stereo radios and tiny pocket ones. Radios that reach around the world. And radios that reach around your head in stereo. Panasonic, just slightly ahead of our time.
We know what you're up to. You're trying to clean your engine to help your car get more power and better mileage. It's a good idea, but there's a much easier way. Help clean inside your engine with mobile detergent gasoline. We clean up what most gasolines make dirty.
College administrators' plans to cool it on campuses by avoiding confrontation and seeking legal redress apparently have won a first test at prestigious Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Activists there for some time have been protesting the school's defense-related research. Today, they had threatened to seize a building, but MIT got a court order barring disruption of institute routine. How it all worked out is reported by Robert Shackney.
They flew their Viet Cong flags and chanted their slogans. But this was to be a demonstration more of noise than of confrontation. In part because the demonstrators knew they were risking contempt of court. In part because a substantial segment of the student body actively or passively disapproved of the tactics. And in part because MIT authorities had refused to call the police against the radicals.
They're much more intent on recruiting students from all over the state of Massachusetts to their movement. And the standard technique for doing that, which they're trying to play, is to have us get involved in a violent altercation in which a lot of innocent students are hurt. And we're trying to tell the students that that's the purpose, and we're trying to tell the students that they shouldn't get involved, and we're trying to tell the students that we're not going to be involved in hurting them.
There had been talk of seizing and occupying buildings, but bad weather, a sudden downpour rather than politics, provoked the first march inside. And once within the administration building, the demonstrators, by an overwhelming vote, decided not to seize or hold any of the offices or classrooms. Outside, the angry talk continued.
We may not be able to do it this week, but we'll be back next week, next month, next year, until that war is over, until imperialism is over, and you better watch out because we're shutting you down. All right?
The radical organizers still looking for the confrontation over MIT's military research. Today, not finding it. Robert Shackney, CBS News, Cambridge.
A congressional conference committee agreed today on a compromised $20.7 billion military procurement bill. And in the process, they threw out or watered down many of the restrictions the Senate had imposed on the Pentagon in that 2-month item-by-item debate. Among the cuts was a Senate amendment curbing military aid to Laos and Thailand. The compromise bill now goes back to each house for a vote. The Pentagon today abolished the job of the efficiency expert who told Congress about the huge excessive costs of developing the C-5A super transport plane. The stated reason, an economy move. Federal auditors declared today that little or nothing has been accomplished by a 12-year, $5.5 billion effort to clean up the nation's rivers. In that period, 9,400 projects have been built to reduce pollution. But the auditors said a detailed study of 8 rivers shows that pollution actually has increased. They blamed it on industrial waste, poor planning, and inadequate funds. A major source of pollution is garbage. Man turns it out by the ton without knowing how to get rid of all of it. But today, government scientists reported an experimental process that could produce about a barrel of crude oil from every ton of garbage. Not only that, but the oil produced in the process contains little sulfur, itself identified as the culprit in some forms of air pollution.
Excuse me, sorry, but do you have anything for a headache? Nothing stronger than aspirin?
You look intelligent. You should know that all the major pain relievers work mainly with aspirin.
Come on.
Look at the labels. They all rely on aspirin.
Aspirin?
Aspirin's what doctors recommend, and Bayer's the only one that's 100% aspirin.
I'll take 2.
Hi, I'm Marlene Francis, and I'd like to test your judgment. Which of these antacid tablets would you say is stronger? I mean, which do you think settles more of the acid that causes heartburn or indigestion? Well, once again, the biggest is not the best. The smaller Phillips tablet is concentrated, so it's stronger than either of the leading antacid tablets that come in a roll. There is no contest. Phillips tablets are stronger. You like them.
Prices slumped this morning on the New York Stock Exchange in reaction to President Nixon's Vietnam speech, but the averages rallied later in the day to close mixed. Volume was 12,300,000 shares. The New York Exchange Index up 4 cents. American Index gained 6 cents. Now to Eric Severide for comment on the Vietnam position President Nixon took last night. Eric?
In retrospect, it would appear that Vice President Agnew's speech the other day was a tip-off on the line that the President took last night. Agnew frankly encouraged a polarization of popular opinion on Vietnam, not a reconciliation. And Mr. Nixon's speech has that effect. He has gambled, and in asking for a blank check on the strategy of withdrawal, he has the majority with him and can increase that majority. He very probably has accomplished that already. All presidential appeals directly to the country, particularly on matters of war, increase his support for a time. In '64, President Johnson, with the Tonkin Gulf Resolution, easily got a blank check from Congress as to how he would prosecute the war. Eventually, the check bounced. Mr. Nixon is too shrewd to think he can spend the check entirely at his own leisure. It is too late for that. He is also a master of the 1-2 feint and punch. For these reasons, the suspicion is fairly widespread here that he will soon follow his hard-line speech with a soft-line action, possibly another very sizable troop withdrawal. He said he has a scheduled, though not fixed, timetable for withdrawal, but he will not make it public because that would fix it and would benefit only the enemy. There is a real case to be made for that position. What has apparently not occurred even to his critics
is that he also needs to remain sole master of the withdrawal lever for domestic political reasons. Critics can only talk. Presidents can act. But he cannot act even to counter critics' talk if he ties his own hands in advance. He has dismissed the argument that only a fixed public withdrawal timetable will make the Saigon regime pull up its socks and produce concessions from Hanoi at the negotiating table. One of the strengths of his position is that the more extreme war protesters have handed him a straw man with their demand for immediate withdrawal. That is a physical, practical impossibility, as even the North Vietnamese enemy admits. Mr. Nixon changed the word immediate to precipitous, suggesting an image of American soldiers flinging away their guns and swimming through the surf to escape in rowboats. No doubt, a precipitous withdrawal would, for a time, damage world confidence in American steadiness and Americans' faith in themselves, but no sane person is suggesting it. Mr. Nixon, a believer from the beginning in the necessity of this war, puts an apocalyptic valuation on the manner and the pace of our withdrawal from it. Vietnam is not the war to end wars, he said, quoting Woodrow Wilson, but he said in almost so many words, peace through our withdrawal, depending on the manner of it, could be the peace to end peace all over the world. He has made his long-awaited statement. The fundamental argument about this war will continue unchanged. Walter?
Two Latin American commercial airliners were hijacked to Cuba today. The first was a Nicaraguan plane bound from Miami to Mexico City. Later in the day, a Brazilian jetliner was seized over the Andes as it flew from Buenos Aires towards Santiago, Chile. A Navy minesweeper off the North Carolina coast today made sonar contact with a large object in the ocean depths. Navy divers are searching to see if it's the tugboat Marjorie McAllister, missing since Sunday with 6 crewmen aboard.
With the minor aches and pains of arthritis, it sometimes hurts more not to do something than to do it. Omega, with more active ingredients than any other major ointment or lotion, was made to help give you relief for hours. Omega lets you do the little things without the little pains.
Beautiful woman. Wears dentures. To her, they're her teeth. She'd never soak her dentures. She doesn't have to. She found Denture Cream out cleans a soak. Show you. We soaked that heavy lipstick stain. Soaked it all night in the leading tablet cleanser, and look. Even with soaking and vigorous brushing, that denture material is still stained. Now Denture Cream, the powerful toothpaste made for dentures. Denture Cream scrubs, brushes, polishes dentures clean. And it does it 1, 2, 3. See the difference? And Denture Cream leaves your mouth toothpaste fresh. Treat your dentures like teeth. Use Denture Cream.
From just about the time it was settled, New England has taught its people that sweet are the uses of adversity. And today in Frenchboro, Maine, there's a living example of how to make something positive out of 2 negative situations. Charles Carroll reports.
Frenchboro is on an island, 7 miles at sea off the Maine coast. The boats that leave the harbor are all lobster boats, and lobster fishing is the only industry. At Frenchboro, there is no doctor, lawyer, or dentist, no movie house, no bowling alley. In 1900, there were 174 people living here. In 1932, 117. In 1965, only 56. Frenchboro is bleached by the sun and weathered by time. From a distance, it appears to be old, which it is. Even dying, which it would be, except for one thing. And that is the children. This little island town is blessed by the laughter of children. 17 of them attend the one-room school at the end of the harbor. Only 6 are the children of Frenchboro parents. All the others were invited here. They are from broken homes elsewhere in Maine.
Let's go.
They live as foster children with families here, attend school and grow up here, and in exchange, give Frenchboro their energy and youth. In 1965, this school was reduced to 2 pupils, and the state was about to end its subsidy payment. That would probably have meant the end of the school. Well, Yankees are supposed to be resourceful, and these Yankees are. They reasoned that since all the school needed was students, they'd just go out and get some. And so the foster children came to the island. During the day, they're in the care of Arthur Kramer, the village schoolmaster.
Now, what's the first sound in dad? Huh?
D.
Right.
And since he cannot teach all at once, the big kids help teach the little kids. And after school, as both they and Frenchboro firmly think of it, they go home. Two of the youngsters, Kevin Holland and Anthony Brown, go home to Mrs. Vivian Lunt.
Kevin, you and Anthony, come on.
It's obvious what Frenchboro has meant to the children. Have the children meant anything to Frenchboro?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. It seems like that, the island was just so static and still, but with the children fluttering about and going, and it just makes you feel young again yourself. I mean, and you feel so useful and so needed because you have so much to do, and you're expending yourself on the children. You kind of forget that you've got a problem here and there, you know, and it's just... And they have really brought the place alive, and you hear the shouts and the laughter. It's nothing like the sound of children's laughter to make you feel young yourself.
It sounds to me as though this idea, which is a rather unusual idea, has worked out very well for Frenchboro.
Well, it has. Other places has been thinking about doing the same thing, you know. Gosh, without a school in a place, you might as well not live there.
Frenchboro is not a very big place, and everywhere you look, there are the children. They are a joy to the town and a help. The present selectman is David Lunt. Do you suppose, Mr. Lunt, that any of these youngsters will finally make this island their home?
Well, don't know. I often wondered that. I think some of them may. They all seem to like it. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of them did eventually make it their home.
Would they be welcome here if they did move back to Frenchboro?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Everybody seems to be welcome down here.
In the afternoons, when the fog rolls in on this island, Frenchboro looks gray and tired and aged. It's only an appearance. When these children grow up and move away, there are plans to invite others. This is one old town that will always be young. Charles Kuralt, CBS News, Frenchboro, Maine.
And that's the way it is, Tuesday, November 4th, 1969. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.